What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you listen to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at ProAnt. No underscores there, just PROANT. Thank you for joining me on this one-off Thursday edition of Disguise Coverage. I know the regular show, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday. Didn't happen this week. Some things went sideways for me a little bit last minute in the week. Nothing crazy, just things went a little sideways and had to pivot. So here we are on this Thursday edition of Disguise Coverage and talking about, as the title states and as the episode description states, ranking the Buffalo Bills' remaining roster needs across the board. We had legal tampering last week, the first wave of free agency last week, with all of those things starting to come through in conjunction with the extensions that we've seen, some of the cuts that we've seen across the league, some of the re-signings we've seen across the league, and obviously the Bills falling into several of those categories themselves. The Bills' 2025 roster is starting to significantly take shape, and they have operated much in the same way they have the past couple of years. We had the Bosa splash, similar to what we had with the Von Miller splash a couple of years ago, but for the most part, this offseason is, and even the Bosa splash is still kind of operating in the vein of what they do for the most part every offseason, which is try to plug as many holes as possible, do what they can to alleviate a lot of the stress points on the roster so they can head into the draft with, several needs or tweaks or upgrades potentially available, but that they will be able to go with that kind of BPA, that best player available model, and just let the board come to them, let the board fall to them. Ron is already in here. It says, please add speed at cornerback in the draft corner will be a conversation point tonight. Where it falls for me, where it falls for you folks here in the live chat, we'll see as we start to go forward. But yeah, this Bills 2025 roster started to take significant shape given the moves they made to start free agency, given how the rest of free agency has fallen across the league, and given how the rest of this roster looks. So in this episode, I'm going to be diving into my top 3 positions of need, ranking them from 1 to 3, and then I've got a couple honorable mentions as well. And through all of this, the conversation is not just in relation to what the 2025 season will look like, but really what it is beyond. I think anytime you can address both the short and long term, obviously you're going to be in better shape for yourself as a franchise and as a team, regardless of what sport that you're in. But for the Bills in particular, they've got several positions where the concern isn't just 2025, it's potentially 2026, 2027, and there's a lot of things that are starting to take shape, and I think they have an opportunity to address several of those issues. Some of the holes are larger than others for 2025 versus the future, how you rank, weigh, all of those things, and then all putting that within the perspective and the landscape of several draft targets that I like at each of these positions of need, particularly on day 1 and day 2. As we go forward, especially, the end of this month of March, all throughout the month of April, we will be diving into more of the draft aspect of it, specific targets in general across the board, specific targets through the Bills lens, day 1, day 2, day 3 targets, round by round targets, positions of need, all of that. So this is also a little bit of a draft setting, table setting episode, as well as we start to go forward here in this episode of Disguise Coverage. For those of you playing at home and joining me live here on this Thursday evening, feel free as we go throughout the chat. Some of you have already done so in the chat up to this point. Give me your rankings, your thoughts, your concerns, who you want. Is there someone out in free agency that you're still looking for? Is there someone in the draft, who's calling your name potentially? What do you want on day 1? What do you want on day 2? What do you want on day 3? How far ahead are you looking? What's your biggest issue with the roster now? Anything and everything. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, whatever you folks got here joining me live, feel free to put it up into the live chat. Super chats get priority. So if you really got something that's super pressing or you just want to donate, feel free. Anything with a super chat, I will pull up, I will bring to the forefront and put it up on the screen. 1, because I respect the monetary donation. 2, because the color attracts me or attracts my eyes and pulls me away from my notes like a cat with a laser pointer. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, super chats, anything and everything you folks have, feel free to put it up into the comments. We will start to bring things as we go forward in this episode. Wanted to grab some of appreciate the like that was dropped from Everton LVO Koser. I'm probably not pronouncing that last name right, but I respect you. Thank you very much for dropping the like here. Big Papa Bill saying go Bills. Kay Amori, what's up, Kay Amori? Kay Amori says a celebration for the upcoming documentary featuring Ray Davis watching Aunt Joe Marino. Yeah, that was super cool. For those who don't know, I don't know where the picture came from. I think it came from Ray Davis's Instagram. It was sent to me and then tweeted out, and I was tagged in it. But they were doing like a documentary for Ray Davis, and this picture was like, I guess, in like his living room, and he's sitting on the couch, and then there's like a kind of a camera crew in front of him, and up on his TV, on the mantle, like above the fireplace, is an episode of Locked On Bills from yesterday featuring myself and Joe Marino. Joe Marino had me on as a guest, and so I guess Ray Davis was just watching that episode of Locked On Bills. So it's a picture of Ray Davis on his couch, smiling for the camera with a camera crew in there, and then up on his TV is Joe Marino and myself, which is pretty cool. Thank you for acknowledging that. That was awesome. Just Tippy Canoe says, I'm still waiting for the late night Cover One OnlyFans. Hey man, there might be something to that. A little this and a little of that. I don't maybe we'll see it at some point. Thomas says, I want coverage sacks to be a thing again. That's a huge point with my piece for corner. I'll save some of that conversation as we go there, but yeah, the Bills, I think from a coverage standpoint, need to do a better job of restricting or constricting airspace. They need to do a better job kind of taking away the freebies, getting into receivers a little bit, getting into pass catchers a little bit, kind of giving up the no cover zones and the hook to curls and the flats as much as they have in the past is starting to bite them a little bit. And then, especially when you don't necessarily have the horses up front, and even if you do have the horses up front, you're still not seeing that marriage. So yeah, I think, better coverage overall, but in particular, tighter coverage, more disruptive type of coverage is something I would absolutely welcome. Teddy says, he says, the nicest guy in Buffalo sports. I don't know if I'm the nicest guy in Buffalo sports, but I appreciate you being here. And thank you very much for the kind words. K. Mori just says, I want good players with dope names. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Thomas says, I like these. So he says, Trey Amos, Andrew Makuba, and Noel Williams, unless they do something in free agency. Those are several of his targets. Noel Williams and Trey Amos are each corners. Andrew Makuba, safety from Texas. Ooh, I like that. RJ says, so y'all got any of those CB2s left? Nice Chappelle show reference there. Ron says, if Shamar Stewart fell to 30, would you want the Bills to draft him? Do you think Amos will be a first-round pick? Maybe the Bills take him at 30. So I'll start with two things. One, I'm still working my way through edges, and I'm doing the Texas A&M boys, Shamar Stewart and Nick Squirton, in conjunction with one another. I've just started, so I'm not fully through in order to speak to Stewart right now, but he is on my radar. He will be spoken about on the show or social, actually both. So I'm intrigued by his testing and even some of the stuff I've seen on film right now, but I'm nowhere in a position right now to get my full evaluation or thought. Amos, on the other hand, so Trey Amos right now is my CB4. I really, really, really like him. I have a late first round grade on him. My dream scenario right now, we'll get to it as we go forward here, is Trey Amos at 30 or Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. I just don't think Barron's going to be there. I think Amos will be a first round pick. I think he could creep into the first round. I wouldn't like it to be the Bills, but even if it's not, I could see him going in like between like 25 and 35. I really feel like it's a sweet spot for Trey Amos. I like him a lot. I think different teams might value different things at corner, but for me, I think his combine did a lot to, long speed was a question for him. He answered that a bit with his testing at the combine. And then you put the tape together. I really, really, really like him a lot. I feel very strongly about Trey Amos. Maybe the Bills take him at 30. I would very much like for the Bills to take him at 30. RJ says, dude, that's awesome. Now you need to get Ray Davis in the film. We're trying. We have another couple things in the works for the next cover or separate weeks coming up, several weeks coming up. I'm flubbing already. We're only under 10 minutes in. Yes, we got some things coming through for them. Daniel says, draft a round 1 defensive tackle, round 2 CB, round 2 second pick, defensive end or edge. I think that's a decent formula. I'm pretty much on board with that. I might flip one or two of those, and we'll find out as we start to go forward here. RJ says he forgot that coverage sacks were a thing. Thomas says third and long. Cool. Ron says CB seems like a much thinner position group. Go CB in the first and then DT and DE in the second. That's part of my thinking overall with the draft philosophy, again, which I'm going to get into as we start the segments here. Mainly because I think this, like the defensive tackle tiers depending on how you have them tiered, like tier 2 through like 4 or 5 or even 6, depending on how you have them tiered, has legitimate value and depth to it. You can get a quality starting defensive tackle or a high end, like, or a high, like, defensive tackle 3 with those second round picks. Edge, a little less so. CB, I think even a little less so than edge. So this is part of why I want more, CB in round 1, but I'm very agreeable to a lot of different things. Oh, Daniel says, nice show with Joe Marino earlier this week. Made my day. Thank you very much for checking it out. I always appreciate every time Joe asked me to come on. So it was awesome to be able to talk some ball with him about the new free agents, their schematic fits, their skill sets, all that type of stuff. Glad you checked it out. Thank you, Daniel. Very nice. Ron says, thanks. No, thank you, Ron. I appreciate you being here and asking. Oh, God. Charles, why are you doing this to me? Charles says, if Trey Amos, Kenneth Grant, and Malachi Starks are on the board, who you got? Oh, boy. Okay, I'll start with this. Grant would be third just because I think I could also get – I think the drop-off between Grant, even though Grant is very athletic, especially for his size, I think the difference between Grant and a defensive tackle I could get in round 2, I think that difference is smaller than the difference between Amos at 30 and a corner I can get in round 2 and Starks at 30 and a safety I could get in round 2. Boy – I don't want to be that guy who says tie, but I feel like I got to say tie. I really love Trey Amos. And CB, spoiler, is the biggest need for me on this roster right now. Starks, I just think is going to be really, 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 really good. But safety isn't the biggest need. I'd probably say Trey Amos 1A, Malachi Starks 1B, and then Grant would be second / quote unquote third. Oh, Charles, you knew how to put me in a bind early. Oof. This stressed me out in a good way. Good question. Franzo says, not going to lie, I wouldn't be mad if we ended up with Nick Emmanwori. I'm going to talk about Nick Emmanwori in this episode. So I like where your head's at. Just the Tippecanoe says, the Vikings pick at 24. They only have 4 picks total. Hypothetically, if we trade up that far for a player, how much compensation would that take and for who? I'll start with the who. I think it would be for a corner, and my thought that it would be, for Jahdae Barron if he fell. Or potentially defensive tackle. Maybe Derek Harmon is still there. And I think Harmon would be a good fit. I don't want to spoil too much as we go forward, but I think it would be for, a corner they really like, or a defensive tackle, or an edge that they really like. Outside chance at wide receiver, I think potentially, maybe safety, but I think it would be for a corner or a defensive tackle. You say, how much compensation would that take? I'd have to do like the trade chart calculations, but my thought would probably be you're moving up from 30 to 24. Maybe I got to see where their 4th round picks are. What's tough too is they don't have a 3rd. So that's what makes it like muddy. Like it's definitely not, you're definitely not doing your a 1st and a 2nd to move up that far. I'd probably say, pick 30 and then one of the 4th rounders, maybe also a 5th, maybe something like that. Like maybe multiple day 3 picks because you don't have a 3, but I don't think it will cost a 3 anyway. So I'd probably say like pick 30 and then one of the 4s and maybe also one of the 5s or the 6s or something like that. But fair question. Roy says, this is the time of year I start learning about rookie prospects from folks like you, Ant. I don't watch college football, so I know nothing about the prospects. I appreciate you, Roy. Thank you very much for having faith in me as one of the people for you to go to when it comes to learning about the college game and prospects and fits and all that. I appreciate that. Ross Stott says, I think there's some decent projected round 4 corners like Strong and Alexander. Good corner double dip candidates, in my opinion. There is a good, some good double dipping, but that could happen on day 3 for the Bills. RJ says, I'm drafting Starks. This is the question earlier from Charlie. He said, I'm drafting Starks and trading back up to 31 for Amos. I like that. Ron says, I think Starks will be long gone by pick 30, but CB is a much greater positional value. I agree with this on both aspects. I think Starks will be gone by 30, and I do think CB is the bigger need and positional value. K. Moy says, so the doomsday scenarios, those 3 are available. The Bills take none of them. Oof. Daniel is all in on his picks. He says, round 1, Walter Nolan, Mississippi. Round 2, Trey Amos, miss a corner from Mississippi. And round 2, second pick, round 2B, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. I never pronounce JTT's last name. I just always call him JTT because the last name always gets me, but I think it is Tuimoloau. Tuimoloau. Yeah, I think that's it. I always just flub over it, but yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, JTT does some fun stuff that I think could fit. Sawyer, The short arms, the other Ohio State edge. Sawyer, the short arms are a little bit of concern, but the way he plays the run, his leadership, the athleticism, I think that's also intriguing. I think JTT would be more of a scheme fit because of his play style and size. All right. Thomas says, is David Walker a decent edge sleeper pick? I haven't watched his tape yet, so I can't speak on it. I'm still making my way through it. I've only gone through like the first like 3 or 4 edges right now. I'm deep in defensive tackle, corner, starting with some safety, getting deeper with safety, and then going through there. Ron says, I seriously doubt Amos makes it to pick 56 in the second round. Yeah, I don't think he does, which is part of my wants for him. All right, let's pivot now to ranking the Buffalo Bills' remaining positions of need and, some draft prospects that could potentially fill those needs. Again, for those of you playing at home, let me know in the chat 2 things. 1, what are your rankings? 2, what you think of mine. I'm going to do my 1. Feel free to put what your top 3 are. List them however you want. Order them however you want. As I start to bring up my rankings, again, let me know what you think of my rankings. Let me know what you think of the college players that I'm potentially tapping to fill those needs. Anything and everything that's on your mind. Aside from that, obviously, again, feel free to put into the comments as well. And again, super chats get priority. And thank you very much to Just the Tippy Canoe for your super chat and for being here. And the good question earlier. I like that kind of setting the tone there. Arthur says, do you know if Larry Ogunjobi signed yet? Yes, I believe he has, because they had the presser and did all that stuff. Jonas says, hey, Ant, what do you think about Grant versus Harmon versus Nolan in terms of fit for the Bills defense? Harmon is a very good fit. So if we're just talking about fit, it would be Harmon. Second best fit is probably Nolan, but I like him less than Grant. If we're just talking about pure like archetypal fit from the Bills, it's Harmon, Nolan, Grant. If you're talking about what I like individually, it'd be for the Bills, it'd be Harmon, Grant, Nolan. I do like Grant. I just have some concerns from a pass rush perspective and just the overall fit. But yeah, that's kind of where we're going. Nolan is a bit weird. Walter Nolan, kind of, I think more traits and upside than he is finished product, which is fine. But then, goes off script a little bit from time to time. Sometimes is just kind of playing all over the place and is more of a bull in a China shop than anything, but there is some promise there. Ron says Alexander. I'm assuming you're referencing Darius Alexander. We will be getting to him. All right, so let's start with my number 1 here, ranking the Buffalo Bills positions of need. I'm going to start with my number 1. And if you are a listener of the show or a follower of myself on any of the socials, I feel like you should know what this number 1 is going to be. Now, number 1 is corner. I think just looking at this group right now for 2025 and then even beyond, right? But even just keep it in a vacuum at 2025. You do not have your CB2 for 2025 on the roster right now for the Bills. I don't think this is a novel concept. I don't think I'm breaking ground with anything revelatory here with my statement. You don't have your CB2 on the roster for 2025. Right now, you're looking at Christian Benford, bona fide, legitimate starter, CB1, boom, good, cool. After that, you've got Dane Jackson, Jamarcus Ingram, and Daquan Hardy, who I thought had some nice flashes in camp last year. I thought had some really nice flashes, even better flashes than camp in the scrimmage, and then also flashed in the preseason. He was a surprise cut, came back, was on the practice squad for the year. Maybe an outside shot at him making some noise, but right now, I think you're looking at this group and you've got, again, bona fide number 1 in Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, Jamarcus Ingram. I think Dane Jackson is a very fine CB3, ideally more of a CB4, but I think he's a fine CB3 because of the high floor he presents and his fit within the system. I think he's a dude that I don't mind starting if you're in a pinch, or if you've got some injuries, a guy who can start for a couple years, something like that, right? And these corners also that I'm mentioning are from an outside perspective. I'm not counting Cam Lewis. I'm not counting Taron Johnson. I'm not counting Brandon Codrington, who's more of I guess he's outside, but he's more of a returner than anything, and a guy who's going to play corner and mop-up duty or where games are kind of done. So I'm counting kind of the main guys that are in actual outside CB territory here. So if we're sitting there right now, again, Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, Jamarcus Ingram, and Daquan Hardy. If we are talking the biggest need on this team, for me, it is corner because you have 2 starters and you're down 1 right now. So 50% of your starters at corner right now, at outside corner, you are missing that. And I don't think Dane is fit for it. I liked what Jamarcus Ingram did in the preseason and even a bit in the season when Taron Johnson went out. And you had Jamarcus Ingram kind of doing some dime. He was in the dime looks against Arizona in the first couple of weeks. I thought he had some nice moments, and again, a lot of nice moments in preseason. I like his inside-outside versatility. I actually like him more at nickel than I do outside, but he played adequately, even more so adequately at outside corner. I'm not ready to sit there and say Jamarcus Ingram can be CB2. I don't think Dane Jackson is CB2 again. I think Dane is CB3, like CB3 and a half. But in this system, in this team, I think he's fine as your CB3. You need a starter. So corner at pick 30 is my top want and top need for this Bills team right now. Now, we talked about several of them. If I'm just looking at pick 30 right now, for me, it's Trey Amos or it's Jahdae Barron. So Trey Amos, corner from Mississippi, Jahdae Barron, corner from Texas. A little bit different for both of them. Barron, just what he does as a tackler and what he does from a schematic versatility standpoint, I think is so intriguing. I think you could do some dime linebacker stuff with him. You could drop him in the hook to curls. You can blitz him from the slot. You can blitz him as like an off-ball linebacker. Like he does all this fun schematic stuff at Texas that I think I want more schematic versatility and variability within this defense. Michael Hoyt was a step in that direction. I think Jahdae Barron could be a step in that direction. And even if he's not, say they just want to keep him at outside corner, I think he can play outside corner very well. Where I'm going to some of just my evaluation notes here. Good zone eyes. He reads routes and the QB's eyes well. He triggers appropriately. Good short area burst and quickness. Good ball skills. He's got good hands. He's able to punch, rip through opponents' hands. He's tenacious. Again, he's got that alignment versatility, good zone and spatial awareness. He's smooth and smart in coverage. He's able to fall off and collect guys from the route distribution and route concepts based on whatever zone coverage he's playing. And then you can play some catch man. You can play some scooch because he's got some physical ability. He's got some athleticism. I like how he plays the game smart while still being responsible in his zone and in his assignments. And then the physical ability, the tenacity, everything that he plays with, and the schematic possibility is what really intrigues me with him. Now, again, even if they don't do all that schematic stuff, right? I'm okay with him just being an outside corner because of how he plays the game. The quickness, the recognition, the short area burst, the trigger, the speed, the athleticism, the physicality. You don't have to worry about him fitting the run. Like he can fit the run outside as a force player. He can also come in and kind of like fit the run in like a B gap or a C gap type of deal, depending on what you got from, bodies on the line and what type of surface you're running. He's just a really fun player. Trey Amos on the other hand, just a very good press corner. We talked about, again, restricting airspace if you are the Bills secondary. And I think Trey Amos is a big move in that regard. He's comfortable and effective in press coverage, both soft shoe and true. When I say soft shoe, I mean more of a mirroring type of corner, right? Where you're a mirroring type of press. Also, and I say this every year, but I always like to make sure I qualify or quantify it or clarify it. Oh, falling apart already. Just because you're in press doesn't mean you're necessarily jamming. Press is just the idea of being aligned like inside your man, like right, like into his kitchen, closing that airspace right off the line. He's on the line, you're on the line with him, right? Soft shoe press off of that is you're pressing, but you're using more of your feet and body position. You're mirroring kind of what the wide receiver is doing. True press is your jam. So the ball, the snap, you're getting hands on. Ideally it's one. Some guys will go with two. I don't necessarily like two-hand jams because it locks your hips, and if you're off slightly, you can get beat easily inside, outside, around the top. It can be a problem. So true press is that jam. And a soft shoe is more of that mirroring type of press. Amos is comfortable and effective in both. He does do more soft shoe than true. I would actually like to see more true, more physicality from him in general. Very adept at passing off and collecting guys from the route distribution. You will watch him, carry his guy in zone. For example, say you got a 3-by-1 and he's to the single receiver side, right? So say he's lined up on the single receiver, and on the other side of the field, there's 3 receivers. On the snap, his man, so there's only one receiver to his side, say he runs a drag, right? So, and say it's cover 3, so he's dropping in his zone, so Amos drops into his deep third. His man isn't threatening him at all. He ran a drag. He's going to the other side of the field. He immediately will get his eyes to the trip side and look to see who's coming across field. Can he pick up a post? Can he pick up a crosser? Can he pick up an inbreaker? That type of ability to just fall off and then collect. Carry guys, deliver them, fall off, collect. That type of ability he displays regularly in traditional, spot drop zone coverages. He's got some match ability. He's got some man coverage ability. Real nice system transference from Ole Miss to the Bills. Really good zone and spatial awareness. He's able to locate the ball and make plays on it, or he can read the wide receiver's hands and punch through accordingly. Some catch man coverage, good bail technique, some true press, soft shoe, some off man. I had questions about his change of direction and long speed, but the combine really went a long way towards easing both of those. He's a smooth strider. I would like him to be even more physical than he is. He is somewhat physical. He's not overly grabby, which is nice to see in guys who are operate in press and operate with some physicality. And overall, he's just able to stay in phase through a combination of footwork and arm length. He's got good feet. He's got good hand usage and hand technique, and his ability to kind of stay in phase and attached to receivers, I really like for him. And so those are my top 2 picks at 30 if we're talking corner. I wouldn't hate Maxwell Hairston, corner out of Kentucky, because of the speed and the athleticism, what he brings. I have some questions about his tackling ability, as I think a lot of people do. He's willing, but he's just a poor tackler. Angles and decisions in run support, as far as being a real run fit player or a force player, it's questionable. And then you add in the smaller frame and stature, it's just a little worrisome. But the short area burst, the quickness, the speed, he's got the type of speed where if he gets fooled, like he thinks you're running a vertical up the sideline and you cut it back in and run a post and he's completely fooled, he can just do a quick speed turn and he's right back on you because of how fast he is. And I think he would be a fun fit. I don't love him at 30. I wouldn't be opposed to him at 30. It's just, that need is there. But I would prefer him more in the kind of the round 2 type of range. I don't think he gets there to round 2. So that's kind of where that gets in there a little bit from a muddy perspective. Let's go some comments from some folks. Yeah, a lot of things we've already addressed. Noah says he likes Darian Porter, but he's the same age as Kyer Elam. I only thought he was 2 years younger. I like Porter. The slight frame bothers me somewhat. He's another one where I think kind of the tackling, I wonder, even just as a force player, like he's willing, but the lankiness and the smaller frame kind of does him in a little bit, but good spatial awareness, good press man corner. You're looking at another guy with some length and some size to kind of restrict airspace. He's a move in that direction. So is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name because I always butcher it. So is Thomas, the corner from Florida State. Press man, length, size, good fluidity for that length and that size. Willing tackler, but again, not the most sound or physical. Really good trail technique. He's able to create a collision point that he rides the hip. He can stay better connected on breaks with wide receivers, but he's another guy that, type of guy that I would target in round 2 because of the length, the fluidity, the press capability, and his athleticism being tied to it as well. I think it gives you a lot of options in that regard. Well, Michael James says, how much draft capital would you burn to secure Jahdae Barron, for example? Would you use next year's round 1 to draft Will Johnson via move up to the early 10s this year? Oof, that's tough. So my willingness to, how much draft capital I burn to secure Barron is tied to how much Amos is still there. So say like Barron is still there in the early to mid 20s. I'm looking to trade up, but if Amos is still there, I'm just sitting there at 30 and I'm hoping one of those two guys are there at 30. As far as draft capital, I have no problem trading multiple day 3 picks to move up for Barron because of how much I like him and how good I think he is. The Johnson one, oof. Would you use next year's round 1 to draft Will Johnson via move up? No, because I'm comfortable staying at 30 and getting Trey Amos and not having to burn next year's one. But I do like Will Johnson. I mean, and also poor Will Johnson just has the unfortunate piece of being in the same draft as Travis Hunter. Otherwise, he'd be a really good corner one. Just a lot of professional aspects, size, frame, the way he plays the game. Had a bit of a down year this past year, but I mean, man, the type of professional defense he comes from. I don't think I wouldn't trade next year's one to move up into the early 10s to get Johnson. Just because of the other corners that I think will be there at 30. But oof. Yeah, people mentioned Noah Williams, Frazier, some sleepers at corner. Yeah, there's a lot of fun names. Pop says he's late to the party. Appreciate your pops. Oh, Ron says I'd love to get Amos, Trey White with more speed. Oof, that's actually kind of fair. Oh, hey, Dom. Dom joining the chat. What's up, Dom? Appreciate you being here, Dom. Thank you for stopping in. What's up? But Noah says I will wait to get Caleb Downs next year at safety. Man, you're gonna have to have to be like a top 5 pick to get Caleb Downs. He's gonna go high. Downs is so nasty from a physicality perspective, from a tools, traits perspective, a coverage perspective, a mentality. Man. Noah says McDermott seems like a Maxwell Hairston guy. There are some things I've heard, some off the field things about Maxwell Hairston that I think I just remember this, that might knock him maybe out from the Bills from an off the field standpoint. I don't know if they're confirmed or not, but not great, maybe, but we'll see. But we'll see. Oh, good comment here from Charles, and I'll move on to my next one. Charles says, considering where the Bills are, do you think they go for players ready to contribute immediately versus swinging for upside that they have to develop? Good question. I think it depends on the position. I think if you're looking at a corner, it's got to be somebody who can contribute immediately because you need a CB2. If it's a defensive tackle, I think they're okay with Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, and then letting, a rookie defensive tackle develop to become defensive tackle 3 or 2 next year or the year after. Similar with edge. I think it depends on the position. So it really, honestly, a lot of the positions that they can go for, I think could be guys that they have to develop. Corner is the big one where it's got to be somebody ready to contribute immediately. If you're taking a corner like now, you're the first corner that you take in this draft has to be somebody that's ready to step in and contribute immediately as a CB2. It can't be like, oh yeah, this guy could be CB2 next year or the year after. You do need a CB2 next year, but you need one right now. And especially too, even Benford, like it's not a guarantee that Benford gets extended or resigns. Maybe they franchise tag him. You never know what can happen. Maybe you need a CB1 next year. So I think for corner, I think they'll go for somebody who's ready to contribute immediately. For other positions, I think they would potentially swing for upside at edge or, interior defensive line, for example, or even wide receiver, because those guys don't need to contribute now or contribute right away. Thomas is talking about Angel Makuba again. I'm going to talk about Angel Makuba in a bit. All right, let's move on to the next position of need here for myself and for the Bills, in my estimation. Interior defensive line. And I want to phrase this frame it, I should say, within several thoughts for me here. We're looking at the interior defensive line right now, and under contract, you're looking at Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, Dwayne Carter, Zion Logue, Branson Dean. Logue and Dean, more practice squad guys, haven't really been regular lineup contributors. The top 4 have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, what we expect from Larry Ogunjobi, and then Dwayne Carter. The reason interior defensive line is number 2 for me, again, centers around several thoughts that I have. First, I'm not completely ready to move on from Dwayne Carter, but at this present time, I think he's best suited to be defensive tackle 5. Defensive tackle 4 at the absolute highest, but I think that's more of if you're in a pinch and I got to stop because we got a super chat. Thank you for being here, Dom. And thank you for the super chat. Dom says, and who would win a cover 1 battle royal in the octagon between you, Eric, Aaron, and Greg? And he says, no weapons. Probably Eric. You know what Eric does for a living. So Eric, I'm just going to, I'll put all my money down on Eric. Second is interesting because I think you've got different skill sets amongst everyone that's left. But if you're just asking who would win, it's Eric. The background, the training, I think he's got it. The shape that he's in, I feel like he's got that locked. I would say Eric, he's just probably way more technically sound in the octagon than any of us. Good question. I like it. Thank you, Dom. So I lost my train of thought. That was funny. So I'm not completely ready to move on from Dwayne Carter. Right now, I think he's best suited for defensive tackle 5. What you got from him last year is, and this is even, I see a couple comments talking about, Carter playing before he got injured or the wrist injury. For me, even before the wrist injury, he was almost non-existent on the field. I know he had a couple nice flashes against the Texans, a couple nice flashes on like a 3rd or 4th down, maybe towards the middle of the year. But the majority of the season, he was getting blown off the ball against the run and having very minimal impact from a pass rush productivity standpoint. I think his pass rush productivity was somewhere in the low 4s, the low to mid 4s. It was one of the worst on the team. Granted, they didn't have a lot of good pass rush productivity from the interior. One of the worst in the league, just very minimal from a pass rush perspective. And the run defense was a problem. Constantly getting blown off the ball vertically, horizontally, getting pushed out of his gap. There was minimal anchoring. There was minimal splitting of double teams. So I'm not completely out. I always think you need to give guys a couple years, at least usually for me, 3 years to kind of acclimate to the league until you really make a concrete decision on a prospect or a player. But right now, I'm not out on Carter, but I'm very skeptical of what he can contribute as far as a meaningful snap or meaningful rotation piece. So I think he's best suited to be a defensive tackle 5. He could be a defensive tackle 4 if your top 3 are studs, which I don't think that's where the Bills are right now. So I think he's best suited for more of a defensive tackle 5, defensive tackle 4 at the absolute highest. Daquan Jones, I think he's best suited to be defensive tackle 3 or defensive tackle 4, depending on how you want to define the rotation and what you're doing. Larry Ogunjobi, I think he can play some one tech for the Bills, given their system and archetype inside, but I think he's better and or best suited for a 3 tech role. So if you take all of that in summation, for me, that means you need a starter opposite of Ed Oliver. I think you need Ed Oliver, a starter next to him, and then Daquan Jones and Larry Ogunjobi as your 3 and your 4, or your 4 and your 3, however you want to label them. I don't care. And then Dwayne Carter is the 5th, which means you need to invest in a defensive tackle in either round 1 or round 2 because you don't have any 3rd-round picks. Again, like we talked about earlier, I do think there is opportunity to still get guys in round 2 at those picks. What is it, 55, 56, and 62, or whatever it is in round 2. I do think you can get a quality defensive tackle at that spot. Somebody who could potentially start next to Ed Oliver or be a high-end 3 as a rookie and potentially develop into more. So that's somewhat good news. But again, I do think you ideally need a starter or another high-end rotational guy. It doesn't mean I'm out on Dwayne Carter. Just think with where Daquan Jones is right now, with where, again, Larry Ogunjobi is a free agent at this time next year, so you would potentially have to bring in another guy next year, and then you have the Carter questions. I think you need an answer right now for 2025, but you also need to set yourself up for success for 2026 and beyond. So that being said, at pick 30, I would love Derek Harmon. I don't think Harmon's going to be there. I think Harmon really fits what they want from a run defense and from a pass rush perspective. And all of this, I should have said this first. Within all of this, right, you have to remember what the Bills like on the interior. Even like their bigger bodied one techs are usually more, they're not necessarily space eaters or pluggers. Star Lotulelei was strong, wasn't a massive, he was a massive man, but not necessarily from an interior defensive line standpoint. Even Daquan Jones, another guy that they like archetype for what they want as somebody to play next to Ed, to play in that one tech role. He slimmed down from what he was before the Bills. His playing weight was between like around 307 to 310. So that's the type of like big body they're looking at one tech. They're not looking at guys who are 320 plus or 315 plus. Maybe they will if there's some sort of athletic freak who also has pass rush upside, but they don't want just a plugger. They don't want, if you needed, evidence of that, they were still going with Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson last year, even though they were getting blown off the ball and were largely ineffective overall. They were going with both those guys versus Elianku, who was stout versus the run and offered you some plugger and space eating type of, and body eating type of capability. You need to be able to rush the passer. You need to be able to one gap penetrate and get upfield. So if you're looking at a one tech, that's what you have to keep in mind. Like Tavondre Sweat, I don't necessarily think is going to be on their radar. Guys like that. So they might change a little bit. Them, bringing in Lakey Fotu from the Jets, previously of the Cardinals before that, for a visit is interesting because he's not an upfield juice kind of guy. He's more of a, a truer type of one tech. Doesn't really fit what they've done in the past. So maybe it's an indication that they're considering changing their archetype or their body types on the inside. But anybody that starts opposite of Ed, you still have to look within the, and for me, I'm saying this for myself as well. I want somebody who can limit displacement. I want somebody who can split double teams or anchor against them, gum up the works, will not get driven off the ball vertically or horizontally versus individual base blocks or versus double teams. So I want somebody that skews more towards run defense. I don't want it gone completely. I would like somebody who's more maybe 60-40 run defense or 65-35 at most. I think they're looking at the opposite. They want somebody who's more 60-40 pass rush or maybe even 55-45 pass rush. Actually, no, probably further. 65-35, maybe 70-30 pass rush to run defense. They want penetrators. Larry Ogunjobi is a good example. Like he'll battle. but he'll get displaced. Guys are going to get under his pads and drive him off the ball. But what does he give you? He's a gap shooter. He's a penetrator. He's a havoc and disruptor. He's a havoc causer and a disruptor. That's what they want on the interior. So that all has to be framed within everything, right? So that being said, I think Derek Harmon is probably the best fit from a run defense and pass rush standpoint and a known quantity. I don't think he's going to be there at 30, but at 30, I'm looking at someone like Harmon. And I forgot who mentioned it earlier. I really came along on Darius Alexander's tape from Toledo. Again, I think Harmon will be gone. Alexander would probably be my defensive tackle pick at pick 30. I prefer him in round 2. I thought initially there was a chance he would be there at pick 56. I don't think he's going to be there now, which is why I'd be fine if they took him at 30. His athleticism, the pass rush ability, I'm going to find my notes on him now. The athleticism, the pass rush ability, he does play high at times, but he was better at recognizing blocking schemes than I thought. I do think he needs to be improved here. He'll get caught off guard from time to time, but he was better than I thought. And I do think he needs better pass rush transitions and or moves and plan. He'll stall out a bit more often than you like, and I think that ties into him playing high at times, which is understandable given his frame and how big he is. But the long arms and his play against double teams is something that really intrigued me, specifically the game against Mississippi State. Being able to regularly drop the knee versus double teams, that takes the technique and the execution and the functional play strength, but it also means you have to recognize that the double team is coming and being able to adjust. So being able to drop the knee or anchor and hold his ground, like if he's not seeing it, but being able to dig his feet in and play with lean and leverage and use that length and not get blown off the ball, that really brought me around on him. His ability to just hold his ground and defeat blocks. And then when he stays low, his length and strength make him very hard to move. I think he would be a good fit for what the Bills wanted, quote unquote, one tech. I still think there's a chance he could be there in the second round, but I wouldn't be opposed to him at pick 30. And another defensive tackle who I really like is Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. There's really several. There's so many. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. I think he's more of an early down player. There's not a lot of pass rush juice for Tyleik Williams, but he is explosive and powerful at the point of attack. So not only can he eat double teams, limit displacement, throw guys around, drop the knee, block recognition, all that stuff versus the run, but he has enough juice and power to knock back offensive linemen and compromise the pocket. I think he has more athleticism than he gets credit for, despite being more of an early down player. He's got good lateral agility and explosion, strong hands, functional strength. He's a gap controller who's able to anchor and withstand blocks from a multitude of ways. I think he plays with good pad level on the line. You'll watch him get underneath offensive linemen that are smaller than him. He can read the running back's tracks while engaged. He's able to multi-gap. He rarely gets displaced. The biggest thing, again, he's not filled with a ton of moves, right? You're not seeing a ton of like, oh, watch this cross chop, watch this club rip. Like, look at everything that he's doing. He's more of just, if he's going to get some pass rush, it's with some lateral agility, maybe a quick arm over or a quick dip and rip. Not necessarily dip, but maybe a little bit, but just more club rip, or he's driving somebody back into the pocket. I think he's more of a two-down player, but you could develop him potentially a bit as a pass rusher with some moves and plan. And even if not, I'll take a guy who's just hard to move against the run, but has enough juice and athleticism to drive guys into the backfield. Also in that mold, I've seen him mentioned a couple times here, Alfred Collins from Texas. Really good against the run, a textbook stack and shed defensive tackle. The hand placement, the extension, the violence and the pop, the peak, and just chucking guys down. Holds his ground, limits displacement, anchors versus double teams. He can torque guys to the ground while keeping his grip locked into blockers. Just power, leverage, and strength inside. Able to read running backs' tracks while engaged. His 85-inch wingspan is the second largest for any defensive tackle measured at the combine in the last 3 years, and his arm length is the 7th largest. The issue with him is there's just no pass rush game really to speak of, even less so than Tyleik Williams. Williams at least gives you more explosion and more juice to drive guys back. There's even less of that with Alfred Collins. Like, Collins is more of a pure two-down player, and I don't think there's much to come from a pass rush upside with him, which makes me think he's more limited for the Bills, but somebody that I would be comfortable taking with in round 2 because he's a rotational body. I want a starter opposite of Ed, but if it comes down to it's Ed, Daquan, Ogunjobi, and Alfred Collins, I like that, and I'm okay with that. I would rather Ed, Tyleek Williams, Larry Ogunjobi, Daquan Jones, but that's kind of my thought there for Collins. And I see Thomas saying Collins actually started at DN for what it's worth. Yeah, but he's got a lot of interior defensive line snaps. There are times where they'll kick him out in like a 4-eye on the inside shade of the tackle, or a 4 right on him, or kick him out as a 5. But the majority of his snaps that I saw, he's playing defensive tackle. He's in the A gap, or he's in that B gap, kind of 1-tech, 3-tech type of role. So a lot of what I watched from him was pure defensive tackle type of stuff. And even so, like either way, whether he's playing defensive end, whether he's playing tackle, whatever, the pass rush game just is not present in his game. Now, maybe it could be, maybe something clicks, or he gets, the right coach or right team gets their hooks in him and he goes from there. But I'm not there with him at that point. But I do like him as a run defender in terms of the physicality and the displacement limitation in a positive way for him on the interior. So that's why he's a big one for me. I wanted to go back to Lucas says, who's your favorite round 2 D tackle? Tyleek Williams. I really like his game, even to the point that even though he's more of a 2-down player, I would. Oh, gotcha, Thomas. With your freshman year comment, Thomas, I see. Appreciate you. Lucas, who was saying, who's your favorite second round defensive tackle? Tyleek Williams, again, even to the point that if the Bills took him at 30, even though he's more of a 2-down player, I don't think they'd take him at 30. I still do think they want more of a true, like a guy who can have an impact on all 3 downs. But it would be Tyleek Williams because of his ability to play the run from a physicality, skill set, size, traits, tools perspective, but also from a block recognition and play recognition standpoint, it's really strong. And then the athleticism and the juice, I think he can do enough to kind of knock guys back into the pocket, drive them back a little bit. So there is some upside now, and then maybe even potentially going forward in the future. So it would probably be Tyleek Williams. Pop says, what's the deal on Deion Walker? His size seems crazy. Man, he just doesn't move well physically. Defensive tackle from Kentucky, an absolute mountain of a man. It pains me to watch him move. Like, it's just not, you just don't see the athleticism that you need to see. And even within that, it's like, okay, he's not the most athletic, so he's got to be this physical, just monster. And he's not. For how big he is, I feel like his base isn't the most solid. So his impact is very up and down. And I just think there's very little movement capability. I don't think he's a fit for the Bills defense. His size is very wild. Maybe someone gets to slim him down a bit. Maybe somebody uses him in an odd front and just plops him down in the middle of the defense and lets him just sit and anchor. But even the anchor isn't like amazing. I just think the size mixed with the skill set and frame and stuff isn't the most ideal. Charles says, why do you hate CJ West? I actually like CJ West from Indiana. There were some really good aspects on tape. He's a guy that I'm looking at. Like I look at it on day 3. Not even round 3, but like day 3, because I'm not taking him in round 2. If he's there in round 4, I would really like that. The quickness and athleticism for his size. He does play a little high versus the run. He's another guy who will stall out as a pass rusher if he doesn't win initially, but he's got good active hands. He's got a good swipe, chops. He'll shed. He's looking to kind of, wax on, wax off as much as he can. He's trying to chop and move. I do think he needs better block recognition, but he's able to pinball back after he'll get initially double or displaced by double teams. I'd like to see him drop the knee more in order to limit displacement. So he will get, knocked off his spot a bit, but he's good on games up front as a spiker, as a looper. He'll run some stunts, gap exchanges. He's a good communicator and adjuster pre-snap for the whole defense and the defensive line. I just view him as, he's a guy that I'd be very comfortable taking in day 3. I see a lot of the comments there from Jordan Phillips from Maryland. He's someone who I've tapped into a small amount. I think he's somebody that probably goes in round 3, which means he's might be out for the Bills. But I have to dive in his tape. He's somebody that maybe they like high enough, or I like high enough, where they go in round 2. But right now, that's kind of where I'm sticking at for my defensive tackles, which is Derek Harmon, Darius Alexander, and then Tyleek Williams and Alfred Collins. Kind of varying different levels of effectiveness. Round 1, round 2 type of guys for that defensive tackle spot. There was a comment here. Yeah, there we go. There's some there. Pete says Harmon is their prototype at 1-tech. That is true. Ron says, is Joshua Farmer from Florida State a fit at 1-tech in the Bills system? Yes, he is. Good question. He is, absolutely. Thomas says, I would have thought Nolan would be a prototype one tech. I think he's more of a kind of a prototype type of three. Like he's all about penetration, juice, upfield, gap shooting. Like let him spike, get upfield. He's not really a big, let me anchor, let me take on this double team. Like you're using him on the snap to move in a multitude of ways, or at least that's what he was most successful with at Ole Miss. And just given his play style and how he's built, I don't think he's more of he could be a one tech in the right defense, maybe get him to bulk up and beef up a bit, but he's not a guy that's really going to be eating double teams and anchoring. Like you want him using his athleticism and his traits to penetrate and one gap, get upfield and go through people. What else? Charles says CJ West day 2. Oh, that's where your initial CJ West comment. I wouldn't be horribly opposed to it. Well, day two, but more like round 3, but they don't have a round 3 pick. And I don't really want to take him in round 2, but fair. See who asked me about Norman Lott from Tennessee. I've only watched a handful of snaps. The game against Oklahoma, I think, and he had some juice. He had like 5 pressures on 21 snaps. But I haven't finished my evaluation on him. But I'm intrigued by the juice. We'll see. Pop says replace Jordan Phillips or Jordan Phillips. I like that. Mary asks, why not the Michigan defensive tackle number 78? So that's Kenneth Grant. I talked about him a little earlier. I just think, let me pull up my notes. Boom, 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 boom. I think he plays a little high, holds his ground versus the run, but not much as a rusher. He does have active hands, good athleticism and quickness. He's very quick for his size. He has juice, but sometimes those hands can be delayed in terms of his usage. He'll let guys get into his body a little bit too much, and I think that nullifies the athleticism and juice that he has. Oh yeah, there's my note. Gets into the body rather than using established hands. Stall out a bit as a rusher. He has a swim, he has a swipe, and a bull rush, but you'll see him kind of just get stuck and hounded at the line. I think his block recognition could use some improvement. I'm watching him just get picked off left and right. High cap scheme runs like trap where his guard is going by him and he's like, oh, sweet. And here comes the other guard to just, hit him right in his ear hole and drive him down the line. I feel like there's his moves on the snap are just him. Like he's just, if he was somebody playing Street Fighter, it feels like he's somebody who's just hitting the buttons. There's not really like a plan of like, okay, I'm going to kick low here. I'm going to set this up because I'm going to do this later. It just seems like I'm just hitting square and then I'm just going to hit circle a whole bunch. Then I'll just hit X. Like it just feels like he's mashing buttons more so than executing a plan or executing a strategic type of move set that he's using to set guys up or he's using to attack with. I think the athleticism is there. He's a freak athlete. How he moves for his size is genuinely impressive. I would not be opposed to the Bills taking him, but their development hasn't been the best at that spot. And so I look at him more right now as more of like a run stopper with some athleticism and juice to him. But if that's the case, I think I would rather have Tyleik Williams in the second than him at 30, but I'm not completely opposed. I like all the thoughts and the questions coming from everybody. Man, because it's more, the draft is still like a month away, so I'm not finished with all these position groups. I feel bad because there's people that are asking questions that guys that I'm not fully, like I'm not finished with my Jordan Phillips evaluation. I'm not finished with several dudes. Which is why I focus more on like the day 1 and day 2 guys, because that's where I've started for a lot. But yeah, I see a lot of thoughts coming in. Chat is very good, and I appreciate you folks. Well done. All right, I'm going to move on to my third position of need for this Bills team. And it comes at edge. And I don't know how everyone feels about edge right now, especially with the Hoyt suspension. But if you're looking at edge right now, and I'll explain why it's my third position in terms of need for this roster. So you got Greg Rousseau, you got Hoyt with that 6-game suspension looming. Same thing with Ogunjobi. And then you got AJ Epinesa, Joey Bosa, and Javon Solomon. I'll kind of work my way from the back to the front. I like Solomon. I like this flashes last year. That being said, there's no surefire thought for me that he's ready to be a top 4 edge this season or beyond. As a whole, say there was no suspension, like all that aside, I like this group as a whole unit in 2025 right now. I still think there's questions, right? For what does Bosa look like? What does Epinesa look like? What does Hoyt look like? But I'm comfortable with this grouping. The reason that I'm comfortable, but it's still, the third biggest positional need for me on this team is for several reasons. One, you do have Michael Hoyt with that suspension. Two, the signing of Joey Bosa. Again, so much of it is tied to how healthy he is, right? And what type of impact you get from him. Is he 50%? Is he 60? Is he 70? Is he 100? Is he 90? How much run defense does he play? Because he's a good run defender, but do you want him doing that? Do you want him more as just a pass rusher? Is he purely just a mercenary or a closer? Or is he something else, like more of a true 3-down guy like he was with the Chargers? Do they want him using that way? Do they not? All these questions, right? But either way, I don't see Bosa here past this season. He either, for me, I think the two likeliest outcomes are he has injuries that derail him a bit, and then maybe next year is more of an affordable year. Maybe he's more affordable next year, but then it's like, do you really want him back because, you know, the consistency wasn't there and the impact wasn't there? Or he stays healthy and balls out, because if he's healthy, he still can ball out. This is somebody who's still a very good edge rusher and a very good edge player. And if he's healthy and balls out, I think he cashes in next year for like a 2-year, $36 million contract, something like that. So I don't see Bosa here past this season. You have Michael Hoyt with the suspension. Bosa has injury concerns for this year. And then AJ Epinesa is an unrestricted free agent next offseason. So I think there's questions around the 2025 group with the suspension and Bosa's health. And then I think there's also questions long-term, because I don't think Bosa stays here after this year, and AJ Epinesa is a UFA next year. So you look at this group again right now: Greg Rousseau, Michael Hoyt, AJ Epinesa, Joey Bosa, Javon Solomon. Say Epinesa leaves next year, say Bosa leaves next year, and Javon Solomon just doesn't develop into what you got. You have 2 edges on the roster next year. That is not enough in any way, shape, or form in terms of quality or quantity. So I think the edge grouping still needs to be addressed at some point. Now, this one is kind of like a murky one. So if we're looking at 30, I like Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. The length, the moves, the plan, the fluidity. He's another guy who I think is just in the mold of a mercenary off the edge as a pass rusher. He knows how to get to the quarterback. Again, somebody who's got moves and plan and fluidity, precision with his hand usage. You watch him, with his cross chops, or even, chopping wrists to disengage blockers, and it is precise. There's no he's kind of hitting elbows or he's hitting up on a shoulder. It is such precise hand usage. It's on the wrist. He's pulling down. He's hitting the club. He's dipping. The movement is so fluid. His effortless fluidity. Good dip, good bend, good core strength. You'll watch him just stab quickly, and then he's a ghost and he's underneath someone throwing the hands. He's running the arc, or he's dipping and ripping and powering through an offensive lineman's shoulder or hands to kind of flatten and get to the QB. Precision and fluidity as a pass rusher. The move set, the athleticism. Very, 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 very excited for that potential at pick 30. Another one that I don't think he'll be there, but maybe he will because he was hurt and he had a down year. Mikael Williams from Georgia. Was like a top 3, top 5 prospect before this season. Jacked up his ankle to start the year against Clemson. Wasn't really the same throughout the year, but played through that injury the whole year. Length, he fits, before I even mention his stuff, he fits what the Bills like at edge. Length, strength, run defense, some pass rush ability, but he's a pocket compressor, not a ton of change of direction, but a pocket compressor off the edge who can reduce down on the inside a little bit and also play the run significantly. And again, as a dude who I thought he was done for the year when I saw that ankle injury against Clemson. I was watching that game live and I was just like, he's a top 5 prospect. This sucks. He's done. And he gutted through it for the majority of the year. They had to rotate him in and out, but this is a dude who was playing on a significantly busted ankle, and he was still managing to chuck dudes around. And again, it impacted him, but he was still having an impact on the game, and he fits what they want. Oh, Pete says that he would move up for Mikael Williams. Or Mikael Williams. There's so many guys' names about football. I think it's Mikael Williams. I still don't think he's going to be there at 30. I think there's a chance, though, because the production wasn't there and because of the injury. But this was a guy, again, who at preseason was like a top 5 prospect. Was number 1 for some folks in terms of what he was, even before Abdul Carter kind of broke out and did what he did. I think the traits are there, and I think the tape from the previous year is there, and him gutting through some stuff. There's still some things to like this year. And as Ron says, that injury could be a blessing for us to have a shot at him. I still don't think he falls to 30. I think there's a chance he falls into the 20s or the mid-20s. Maybe it's a guy they trade up for. Maybe not. But he's somebody that if he's there at 30, I would be fine with because he fits the archetype. And I do think he has a high ceiling. And watching him play last year through that injury, but still having an impact, won me over. But he's a guy, again, who I think has a high floor, but a high ceiling because of the traits and the physical gifts and skill set pieces that he has. Noah says, how about James Pierce? Two things. One, I don't think he's necessarily a stylistic fit and an archetype fit for what the Bills like. Two, I've heard publicly and privately from some people that I know who are in the know, and there is some fire to those character concerns smoke. And he just doesn't strike me as the type of guy that the Bills are going to take in round one. Maybe he falls and is there in round two, and they're like, all right, cool, we'll take a flyer on him. But I just think from an archetype standpoint, stylistically, he's not the best fit. And then with some of the things I've heard publicly and privately, I think from an off the field standpoint, he's not the best fit for this team. Again, things could all change. He weathers the storm. Guys change when they get to the league. But I don't see it as of right now. Ron says he's out on Pierce. Pete says, I'd be upset if we could have moved up a few picks for Mikal and didn't. Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed. Like if he was sitting there at 25 or 26, he's somebody I would gravitate towards depending on who's on the board. Like I don't want to move up for him if like Barron and Amos are still there. Like I'm very much on the corner train in round one. But if they traded up for Mikal Williams, I get it. Like again, this dude, he's a good player. Like, he's a really good player. So that's kind of where my head is for 30. It'd be Donovan Ezeraku and Mikal Williams. But again, I think Williams will probably be gone. And actually, Ezeraku, there's a chance he's going to go before 30 as well. But I think he realistically could be there. More realistically could be there. I wouldn't hate Landon Jackson from Arkansas at 30, but I would much rather have him be a round two guy. And then again, like I said, I'm still working through edge, starting and getting through the Texas A&M boys. So Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, like I mentioned. Also, he's not going to be day one or day two for the Bills, but what's his name from UCLA? Oluwafemi Oladejo. It is an intriguing one to me whose tape I've started to see a little bit. I know some people who like Elijah Roberts. I saw somebody put the name of Tyler Barron from Miami. I really liked watching him at Miami. He's not a day one or day two guy for me, but not a round one or round two guy, I should say. But there's a lot of fun names, I think, at edge, and there's some usefulness. Again, what's going to muddy all of it is like trying to get, in an ideal world, Javon Solomon is ready to be edge 4 while Hoyt is on suspension, and then Hoyt can come back and you figure it out. But I do think they might need to dip into the water here a little bit. Michael James says, would Princely you from Ole Miss be okay in round 2? I would rather him in round 3 or a day 3. But I wouldn't hate the round 2. Also, I wrote down how to pronounce his name, so I want to pronounce it right. Princely Umanmielen. So you're welcome from that. Ron says the kid from UCLA caught my eye on the combine. He was smooth. He's a sleeper. Yeah, again, that is I guess I've written down to say Oluwafemi Oladejo from UCLA, former like off-ball linebacker, moved to edge this year, so not a ton of production. He's still raw, but there's some upside and athleticism, plays the run. He's got some fun pieces to definitely look at for sure. But yeah, I think looking at this edge grouping, you could use some reinforcement for this year because Bosa's going to get hurt at some point. Hoyt has the 6-game suspension. What happens if Bosa gets hurt in week 3? And then your top 3 edges are what? Groot, Epinesa, and Solomon. Like, you need reinforcement for this year. And I also think you need reinforcement for 2026 because I don't think Bosa's coming back. And there's a chance you also lose AJ Epinesa. And then there's also a chance that Solomon doesn't become anything. And so you're sitting there being like, what do we do? So that's why edge is number 3 for me. Pete says, in reference to my comment earlier, he says, that's fair. Not sure Barron or Amos will last till 30. It's just so late to get such safely effective prospects. I agree, which is why, I would be okay with that trade up for Williams. What I also like now too, a couple weeks ago, I was on like an island with Trey Amos. I was like, no, he's got a round 1 grade for me. I'd take him at 30. And people were like, no, he's a round 2 guy at best. And now he's starting to creep up into round 1 more and more with each passing week for people. And I like it more and more. I don't like him as much as I liked Trent McDuffie, but I have a similar feeling about him that I did towards McDuffie. That's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil anything or jinx anything. Ron says, what do you think of the Ohio State DEs? If we're talking about Bills fits, I like JTT more than I do Sawyer. I think Sawyer does fit from a play style and from a mentality standpoint, but the short arms, I think, are going to be a real knock against him for the Bills. I think for a lot of teams that'll be a knock, but for the Bills especially, I think JTT with his style, the compression, the juice, some of the moves and plan, I think he'd be more of a fit. I wouldn't be opposed to someone like him at the end of round two. Again, I'm phrasing all of this because they don't have a third round pick. So there are some guys you might have to reach because I think there's a bunch of guys that would go in round three that aren't going to be there in round four. So if you want them, you're going to have to take them at the end of round two, depending on how the board falls. But somebody who I wouldn't be opposed to. Pete says Amos has been heating up for sure. A W for you. You never know. He could be heating up and he can end up being a terrible player. I just thought it was funny. Not that anybody kind of gave me pushback, but I definitely felt like very much on an island I was like, oh, I love Trey Amos. I love Trey Amos. And really nobody was talking about him. I was like, oh, okay. You know what? You know what I think? Kendall texted me this a couple days ago. I think I didn't look at it, but I think Daniel Jeremiah put him in his first round in his latest mock draft, and I think that's why it's heating up. I think it was Jeremiah, somebody notable put him in round one in a mock, and I think that's why it's starting to heat up a little bit. I think it's Daniel Jeremiah. Somebody feel free to correct and look up if I'm incorrect. I think he had him going to like the Packers or something like that. I think like pick 26. I think Kendall texted me that, but I don't remember, but fair. I like all the names and comments and questions we got here. This is fun. This is a good, engaging chat. My honorable mention, I have two. So those are my top three. Again, corner, interior defensive line, and edge. My honorable mention are equal. And Tom says, DJ also has Kenneth Grant falling to us 30. Oh, fair. Charles says, I have not watched Ivy. I've seen a little of Jordan Birch in watching Harmon, but not a full evaluation. And I have not watched Josiah Stewart yet. All names on my docket once I finish going through Edge. I'm just not there yet. But I will be as we go forward. Also, I'm very excited for April. I have a lot of good guests coming to break down each individual position group. And we're going to have conversations about best day 1, day 2, and day 3 fits for the Bills. A lot of prospect diving and hunting at corner, defensive tackle, edge, and a couple other spots as well. So I'm very excited. So you will have your answers as we move forward here come draft cycle. Noah says, if we pick Landon Jackson at 30, Beano owe me a new TV. I like that subtle way of being like, because I'm going to smash it. Yeah, I wouldn't love it at 30. I'd understand it, and I wouldn't completely hate it. But yeah, I would not love it, especially based on who I think would be there at 30. I would be a little flummoxed, to say the least. But yeah. All right, so my fourth one, that's an honorable mention. It's 2 positions. I have them kind of equally tiered. Slightly more of a 1A, 1B. I'll mention the 1A first. Wide receiver. I like what they have in the room. Again, you guys have heard me say it on the film room. Myself and Eric. No, I said I'd crash out completely. Eric and I have said in the film room. Kendall said it years ago. We've talked about this a lot. Yeah, Ron knows where my head is at. But I've said this a lot. I believe in building the basketball lineup at wide receiver. I believe in having that, have a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, a power forward, a center, like all these different types of skill sets and dynamics present in the wide receiver room. Looking at the group right now, Thomas says Torrey Horton late day 2 or Thornton. Torrey Horton and Thornton. Just like the rhyming. I like it a lot. Torrey Horton, I'm a big fan of out of Colorado State. Hurt last year, but I saw his tape the past couple of years, and I'm a fan of. I haven't gotten to Thornton's tape, but I know he can burn. I'll go here from LaMichael James. Isaiah Bond, I still like his skill set. I thought he had such a down year. He was not the precision route runner that I thought he was this year, but I know he had some injury concerns. And there's also some weird kind of character stuff there as well that I'm not a huge fan of. I haven't watched Jalen Royals yet from Utah State, but I'm very intrigued. Charles says draft Jalen Knoll and Prosper. Yeah, both Iowa State receivers are intriguing. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, for sure. Arian Smith is a burner. No, a good call. Ron says Savion Williams for TCU. Haven't watched him yet, or Besh, but they are on my list. Wide receiver, I'm very superficial at right now with who I've got in the draft. I don't even have full targets right now. Kyle Williams from Washington State, I like, but I'm only like a half game in. So we will see. And yeah, Torrey Horton can absolutely fly. And he gives you some special teams value as a punt returner, which is what I like. So I am making my way through wide receiver. But at this point, again, that basketball lineup type of philosophy, and even if you don't believe in that, like They just need more vertical stretch and juice in the room. The only guy you have right now that can stretch the field is Curtis Samuel, and I don't think he plays as fast as his 40 time indicates. And then also there's injury concerns there. And even if he was 100, 1000% great, healthy field stretcher, if he was everything that you wanted, mind you, I do like him as a player, that's still only one field stretcher. That's still only one guy. Then you've got Keon Coleman, you've got Palmer. Coleman's athletic, but he's not a burner. Palmer can get behind guys, but he's not a burner. Shakir is what Shakir is, but he is not a burner. Like, they need somebody who can stretch the field, who can, run those for the love of the game routes and take the top off so Diggs and other routes can slip in behind. You open up some space, but I also think somebody who can just win vertically and threaten someone. If you get a one-on-one and you can alert that and be like, oh, my dude's got speed for days, he can beat that corner, I'm throwing the deep ball. Like, you need somebody who can win vertically, not just with speed, but then track the ball downfield, make plays on it. So I do think they need that skill set in the room. They need more juice. They need more vertical stretch in the wide receiver room. So I'm looking at a wide receiver in round 4. I know for some people, depending on who falls, I do like Matthew Golden. That's hilarious. Jim literally commented right now. I do like Matthew Golden. It's hard for me to get on board with a wide receiver in round 1, given the other needs. Again, wide receiver technically is like 4th for me. I just think there's either a corner or an edge or an interior defensive lineman that's going to be available at 30 that would serve you better than Matthew Golden. And I do like Golden, the fluidity, the breaks, the ability to space. I don't think he plays to his 40 time. I know that kind of lit a lot of people up, but dude's a good player. And Tank Ninja says Texas fans seem to like Golden. You should like Golden. I like Matthew Golden a lot. I like him. I like Ibuka. I like Ibuka a lot. I haven't watched Tet McMillan yet, but I've seen, from an in broadcast game standpoint in the season, I liked him. It would just be hard for me to go wide receiver in round 1 for the Bills, given the other needs that are on the board for me at this time and for, what I think for the team. Great comment here from Charles saying 40 times speed is so overrated. Get more separators that know how to use their speed. Yes. Play speed is different than time speed. 2 things on this. 1, play speed is different than time speed. 2, you don't need to be a pure burner to win vertically and win down the field. You can do it with deception. You can do it with pacing. You can do it with stem work. But it would be nice if they had a little bit of juice. I'm not saying you're saying that. I just always say these things in conjunction. So, because they always get brought up and thought of. So yeah, wide receiver. I think they need that vertical stretch element and juice in the room. The other one, safety. Mentioned earlier, and Ron mentioned it in the chat a little bit ago when he said safety and wide receiver. So I'll say a couple things on it. And this may say more about the safety room than it does about the players. I don't know, to each their own. I do think Derek Forrest can compete for a starting job. But this safety position is more of, if Malachi Starks is there at 30, I am on board with taking him at 30. If Xavier Watts is there in round 2, I'm on board with taking Watts in round 2. I don't think safety is necessarily a quote unquote need, but I think the Bills could do themselves a favor schematically with either guy, specifically Malachi Starks, Xavier Watts. So this is more of, if Malachi Starks is there at 30, I get it. If Xavier Watts is there in round 2, I get it. There's other safeties that I like, but I just don't think the fits are as seamless. Like, I like Andrew Makuba from Texas. I don't think the fit is necessarily there because of his side and play style. I think he's more of like an apex safety slot, but I do like him as a safety, like the athleticism, the processing, the ability to fall off and collect, but then the juice, the physicality to be able to play from top down, angles to the ball, the short area burst, the quickness. I like it. But he's an example, I feel like, a safety fit that isn't necessarily seamless. Same thing with like Malachi Moore from Alabama. And then I'll speak on Nick Emenwari. Actually, I'll speak on Nick Emenwari now. I don't think Nick Emenwari is a fit for the Bills. I talked about it a bit in the film room. I think Emenwari is best suited to be a box safety / big nickel apex sub package type of linebacker role. That's what I think he's best suited for. And I don't think on tape he plays to the athleticism and size that he tests with. For as big and as athletic as he is, I don't think he plays big and or athletic. Like, I think he's a fine player, but I don't think he makes enough plays where you're like, oh wow, the size really showed up on that one. Like, watch him blow this tight end up. Watch him set the edge versus the run. watch him cover this slot receiver or man up on this, athletic guy. Like, I just don't think you see that enough. And even with the way he kind of moves, he moves very heavy footed, almost like his feet or his like cleats have cement in them. He just feels heavy. And I like him. For those who watch the show, I keep making the joke. I picked South Carolina in my NCAA 25 dynasty, and Nick Emmanwori finished third in the Heisman for me. Won the national championship that year. It was pretty sweet. So I did a lot of things with him in that game. But I don't even know where he's going to rank on my safety board. It's not 2. So we'll see where it shakes out. I'm not too high on him. I just think the fit has to be very particular for him to succeed. I'm not saying he's not a round 1 guy. I just think you have to put him in the right system and with the right team to get him to click. I don't think he's just like a plug and play safety in a variety of teams, right? I think there's some questions physically for as athletic as he is and as well as he tested. I think there's some questions physically. And I also think there's some questions with how he sees the field when he's deeper. So from a processing and a diagnosing standpoint, the deeper he is, coming from depth to play the run, but also kind of processing route concepts and route distributions, I think there's some questions there as well. So I don't want him for the Bills. And I do think the fit is more specific for certain teams. So I want to get to Emmanwori because I know several of you asked about him. Back to like the Bills safety piece as well. For note, again, I've said this throughout multiple times during the season and this offseason. Taylor Rapp only has a $666,000 dead cap hit if cut after June 1st. So it's a $666,000 dead cap hit and a $3 million savings if he's a post June 1st cut. So if a safety falls, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to be like, oh, Malachi Starks is there? Cool. We're going to take Starks and pair him with one of the other safeties and maybe we cut Rapp. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not advocating for that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Or it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to cut Forrest or Hamlin. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Bishop loses the job to Forrest or Hamlin or to another rookie. I say all these things to say that I don't think safety is a need, but I do think it's a legit competition for safety 2 through 4 right now, with the caveat of I think Cole Bishop is the leader in the clubhouse right now to start opposite of Taylor Rapp, which makes sense. I just think there's questions about the safety. If you told me that the opening day starting safety group is Rapp and Bishop, I believe you. If you told me it was Rapp and Forrest, I believe you. If you told me it was Rapp and Hamlin, I believe you. If you told me it was Rapp and a rookie, I believe you. If you told me it was another combination, I believe you. I think there's questions at safety. I think Rapp is the closest to having a spot locked down, and I kind of think in theory that he does, but yeah, I don't think it's a need, but I think it's one that they could upgrade schematically. I've talked about it on the show. Again, I don't want to drill too much on it, but I just think there's a lot of positional redundancy and not necessarily in the best way with like Rapp and Bishop, even though Bishop is a different level of athlete. And, Bishop, Hamlin, Rapp, Bishop, all these type of guys. I don't think they have anyone who, Forrest is probably the best combination of being able to play the post from an athletic position and also being able to process. Bishop can play as a single high post safety from a range standpoint because of his athleticism, but he doesn't have the processing and the recognition yet. Rapp can play it from a recognition and a processing standpoint, but he doesn't have the athleticism and the range. Neither does Hamlin. Forrest is the best combination of all of those. Forrest is probably the best combination at safety for the Bills of athlete, plus being able to play deep, plus being able to play in the box, plus having some physicality and processing. All these things. He's not elite at any one thing, but he's like above average or average at pretty much everything. He's like a 6 to a 7 in almost everything across the board, which is why I don't think you can kind of cut him out of this competition. Yeah, it's an interesting group, to say the least. Manny for Mayor says, should I just give up on Lewis Cine? I liked him coming out of Georgia. I liked some of his tape in the preseason with Minnesota. I don't know. I mean, them bringing in Forrest and Hamlin, I think that doesn't say good things for Cine. I wouldn't say give up, but, I don't think it's great for him. Noah says, how about Taylor Rapp and Andrew Makuba? Makuba is just interesting. I don't know. I see him as more like, I don't mean this like not a starter. I see him more as like a third safety for a team, like a team like the Cardinals who run a lot of three safety looks, or the Rams who run a lot of three safety looks, like the teams who, oh, Ron, you just said Rams. I don't know if you mean that for Makuba or not. But the the idea of him being this guy who can play top down, but play around the box. He's got some juice and athleticism and playmaking on the ball. He's got some slot capability. Like, there is all this intriguing tape for Makuba, but also I don't know if he fits as kind of like a true or truer type of safety type of deal. Oh, and for those asking, yeah, I thought Manny was kind of just generally asking about Lewis Seen. Yeah, Seen is on the Eagles. I thought you just meant like give up on him as a player. Yeah, he got claimed, I believe, in January off the practice squad by the Eagles. So I think he got a ring. So good for him. I'm also seeing a lot of comments too. Like, I know Rap, plenty of dudes have hit each other. Like, I know Rap gets, I don't like the narrative of Rap like friendly fire all the time. I know it's happened a couple times, but it's also happened with Hamlin. It's also happened with like the linebackers and each other. And I see guys hit each other all the time on other teams and on the Bills, and it doesn't get talked about, but Rap has done it a couple times. And all of a sudden it's like a huge story. I do feel like it happens to him potentially more than most, but it's not really a story to me. It's more of a non-story for me. And as Pete says, Rap solved more problems than he created last season. He's not the guy to replace at the moment. Yeah, I don't think he's the guy to replace as well. I think he solidifies that group. But if you told me in order to get Malachi Starks, it costs Taylor Rapp, I'd be like, okay. But that, actually, I feel bad saying, but I just love Malachi Starks, so I'm fine with that. But yeah, so safety's weird. It's not a need, but it's muddy with the competition. I think it's muddy in the positional redundancy. Like, I don't love the Bishop Forrest, or I don't love the Bishop Rapp combination. I like Rapp and Forrest better than I like Rapp and Bishop. I like Forrest and Bishop better than I like Rapp and Bishop. Like, I don't know, like it's just weird. I also too, you guys know, like I didn't love Bishop as a prospect, but I thought his best fit wouldn't be in a system like the Bills. I thought his best fit was as put him in the Patriots with what they like to do with their safeties. Put him with the Ravens, like these teams that love to take three safety or multiple safety looks. And okay, are you blitzing? Are you off ball? Are you playing deep? Is it single high? Is it split field? Are you playing in a slot? Are you going to man? Are you going to like hook to curl to flat? What are you doing? I think he's better suited for that type of defense than in the Bills. Even though the Bills are very versatile and interchangeable with their safeties, well, they were with Hyde and Poyer, I do think that's more of a traditional type of safety role, and I don't think Bishop is necessarily best suited for that. But again, he could develop into that, so we'll see. Yeah, safety's weird. I would like them to take one on day 3. And I wouldn't be opposed to Malachi Starks at 30. Even, again, we talked about it earlier in that example I think Charles gave me. I am Trey Amos or Jahdae Barron or bust at pick 30. I don't think Barron's going to be there, so I'm signing right now. I'm signing up for Trey Amos at 30. But if Malachi Starks was there, oh, man, the heart wants what it wants. And the head wants what it wants, too. Like, Starks is sweet. His tape the past couple of years was better than it was this past year. But, man, oof. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by those position groups. And yeah, that's where I'm at this point. So corner, interior defensive line, edge, and then honorable mention for wide receiver and safety. That's where I'm at right now. You know who doesn't need an honorable mention? One Pie Pizza. The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sincerely, if you have not gotten yourself some One Pie Pizza, get yourself some. I don't say they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they're the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, a great cheese to sauce ratio. They make their own homemade blue cheese. If you get different toppings, they chop them all up evenly and sprinkle them along the pizza evenly for like even taste distribution in every bite. They do catering options. They make a really great array of mac and cheeses. It just so good. I had them cater an event during the summer and it was phenomenal. Everybody loved it. A lot of out-of-town people who loved it as well, which was cool. And they also do a lot of good for the community. Partnering with Roswell to knock out cancer, partnering with the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation, the SPCA. They do a lot of good for the community in Buffalo, just from a giving standpoint, but also from a delicious taste standpoint. So if you live in the Buffalo area or if you are traveling to the Buffalo area or visiting, whatever, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not be disappointed. Again, the online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. Paisan says, who's the best pizza in Rochester? I don't know. I've only had pizza in Rochester once, and it was in college, and I don't remember where we went. I was taken there by some friends, and I don't remember where we went. It was good though. But I don't know. So if there's someone in the chat from Rochester who knows what's up with pizza, tell Paisan who's the best pizza in Rochester. Zen Clover says, you prefer Trey Amos to Maxwell Hairston? I think I would lean Hairston. I do prefer Amos from an on-field, scheme fit standpoint. I like Hairston as well. If you go back earlier, when I talked about corner, my picks at 30 are Barron or Amos. I wouldn't be opposed to Hairston at 30. I would like him more in round 2, but I also have heard there's some off the field stuff that might ding him on the Bills board. But just from an on the field standpoint, I do like his game. The tackling is a bit worrisome. He's more of a guy that I would like with the round 2 pick than I would at pick 30. But if they took him at 30, I wouldn't be completely floored or disappointed because the speed is very real and his play style from a pass coverage standpoint works. And then Noah says, Siobhan Revel or Siobhan Revel. I've heard his name pronounced like 7 different ways in interviews. I'm a couple games into him, but I need to see the 2023 tape and then juxtapose it with the 2024. I am very intrigued just because of the ball skills and the coverage ability and what he did. But right now, it's going to be hard for people to pass Amos for me or even Barron. Adrian says, what do you think about James Pierce Jr.? I haven't finished my eval on him, but I don't think he's necessarily an archetype fit for the Bills. And I've heard both publicly and privately about some character things that I think are going to make him a bit of a hard fit for the Bills and maybe even other teams in general. But the juice plays and the athleticism sure plays. You see that with regularity for him and from him. But I'm still not finished with my evaluation for him with the edge grouping in general. But yeah, so that's what I got right now on Pierce. Oh, RJ says pie time in Rochester is pretty good. The owner is from Manhattan, but a Jets fan, unfortunately. And then he says, I hope one pie comes to Rochester one day. I would second that notion. We talked about it, the global domination. Start with Rochester and then work to Syracuse, and then we get into Toronto, and then we take over Canada. We're all over. All over. Zen says, I agree with your criticism. I just think Hairston has a higher ceiling personally and could figure it out. Plus anticipating more man coverage next year. Didn't know about the off the field stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with Hairston. I think the ceiling is also high for Amos. And even from a man coverage standpoint, Amos, I'm comfortable with putting him in press man right now. And because of his footwork and arm length and technique, he's just going to be a problem. And he's going to restrict airspace at the release, in the stem, and on the break. I think Hairston is less technically refined, but the speed and where am I? Let me find my notes on Hairston. But the speed and where's my eval? Why is my doc? Yes, that's what it is. But Hairston's recovery speed and speed in general, and he's got very calm and clean feet. That allows him to stay in phase almost with everybody. The short area burst and that man coverage ability because of his calm feet and somewhat of his physicality and tenaciousness, I think it does work a bit. But I just prefer Amos from his scheme, the schemes that he's coming from at Ole Miss, and then the individual skill set pieces. Aside from the off the field stuff, I would still have Amos ranked ahead of Hairston, but I do like Hairston, even with the smaller stature and frame and some of the tackling woes and concerns. But yeah, fair point. Fair point there, Zen Clover. I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we're starting to wind down here. If you have not already, please, thank you, drop a like on this video. If you have not dropped a like already on this video, please drop a like on this video here on YouTube, whether you're watching now, watching later, whatever have you. Please, and thank you, drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams here on YouTube. So please drop a like on this video. Turn on notifications for the Disguise Coverage playlist here on YouTube. Subscribe to the Cover One channel to get your various levels of Bills coverage throughout the entirety of your week. If you're listening to this podcast on one of the audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever have you, please, and thank you, rate and review and subscribe. Those go a long way on the audio platforms towards helping the shows to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So please, and thank you if you have not already done that or done so. And word of mouth is also tremendously appreciated. If you enjoyed the show or if you've enjoyed any of the shows, tell your family, friends, loved ones, whether they're Bills fans, football fans, whatever have you. Word of mouth is tremendously appreciated. It's how this brand started and had a lot of growth. So friends, family, loved ones, all that stuff, tell them about the show. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. I see some of the comments coming through for myself in a nice way. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Pete. Thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate you folks. And yeah, thank you to everybody for joining me here in the chat this week. I know bit of a off schedule with not doing the regular show on Tuesday night, 9 p.m. like normal. Instead, it was, this Thursday, 9 p.m., obviously tonight. I didn't communicate it. It kind of came by the wayside at the last minute. Again, some things went sideways for me, but I appreciate everybody who tuned in and joined me live. The conversation was really fun tonight. I like the questions. I like where everybody's head is at in terms of what you're looking for, what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, likes, dislikes, questions for myself, conversation with one another. This is really fun. So I hope you folks all had a good time who joined me live. If you didn't join me live, try and join me live next time we go live and get yourself involved in the chat. Start to really get into this conversation. This is the fun time of year for the offseason where the first wave of free agency is done. A lot of the pieces have already fallen off the board. And now we get into this conversation starter of, oh boy, like who are they going to draft at what spot? What position is priority? How do you kind of allocate your resources based on priority and urgency? So a lot of fun conversations will be happening and be had on this show going forward up and through the week of the draft. So I hope you folks continue to join me live here on the show. And thank you very much, everybody who tuned in live tonight, watching later, listening later, whatever have you. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the kind words from everybody in the chat. I appreciate Ron saying, Ant, there's still hope we get Asante Samuel Jr. I'm still hoping. I don't think it's happening, but I'm still hoping a little bit. There's I appreciate that. RJ talking about a good primer for the draft tonight. Yeah, it's only going to get better. Thank you very much for the kind words, folks. I appreciate you. Charles says, who's winning your NCAA bracket? Auburn. But I'm still holding out for North Carolina. That's my favorite team. I doubt it. We'll see if they can beat Ole Miss tomorrow. But yeah, I'm holding out for Carolina, but Auburn is my pick for the bracket. We will see. I appreciate you folks. Thank you very much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for a regularly scheduled live edition of Disguise Coverage. But until then, I'll see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.